No matter how they find a way to do it, the New Orleans Saints must get quarterback right going into 2023. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube as well. I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. All you got to do is pick 2 to 5 players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projection. Get those right. You can get 10 times your entry back. And of course, if you're a first-time user, you can get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with promo code Locked On. It's prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. On today's episode, I have a crazy idea about how the Saints might be able to improve on the offensive side. Sean Payton is potentially seeing a second interview with the Denver Broncos. Sure looks like he's preparing for it. At least we'll hit those reports and also discuss whether or not the Dallas Cowboys will join the Sean Payton sweepstakes. But first, I want to do a 7-round mock draft for you because it is Mock Draft Monday. And no matter how the New Orleans Saints do it, they have to get quarterback right this off season. That is absolute, right? We know that about them. We kind of discussed that in the Pete Carmichael episode and all that as well, which if you missed that from Friday, make sure you go and check that out. I waited a little bit longer to record today because I just kind of wanted to see like if there was going to be any movement with the coaching stuff. But the number one piece here for the Saints over the course of this offseason is getting quarterback right. So there have been some reports out there that are connecting all of the NFC South teams, which I'm a little surprised to see the Atlanta Falcons in that conversation, with former Raiders quarterback Derek Carr. Derek Carr speaking very highly of Dennis Allen recently. I didn't realize that the connection would be as strong as it apparently is, but that is a possibility for the Saints. If it makes you feel any better, Derek Carr is 4th in the NFL amongst active quarterbacks when it comes to fourth quarter comebacks, game-winning drives, things like that, or 5th in game-winning drives amongst active quarterbacks, something that the Saints will need to have going into 2023 and that they struggled with in 2022 was closing games. So having somebody that can do that, I see a little bit of a benefit there. But if the Saints want to give up their draft capital in a different way to get a quarterback, then it means that they would have to go to the free agency market and at least find some quarterback to come in and kind of help get things done while that rookie quarterback gets ready. So for our first pick of our mock draft today, I'm kind of going 2 directions here. The big thing is if the Saints, let's say, don't use their second round pick, let's say they get trade capital from Sean Payton and then they trade that trade capital then for Derek Carr, right? So let's say that they do that, they could use that top second round pick for another, good wide receiver out there to add to their weapons, particularly guys that can do a little bit after the catch, like a Josh Downs, for instance, out of North Carolina, or maybe they go for a Xavier Hutchinson out of Iowa State, who is a big time, contested catch guy and all of that. So they would have a whole lot of different ways to kind of deal with and set themselves up and continue to build up their offense with a Derek Carr under center by adding more dynamic playmakers, things like that. If they don't go that way, then I still like the idea of them using their top pick on a quarterback. Seen a lot of drafts, a lot of mock drafts out there using the top pick for a tight end. I don't think the Saints should go that route. It takes forever for tight ends to translate into the NFL. They've got a solid one right now in Juwan Johnson, who has absolutely developed. You've got Adam Troutman, who can do all the other stuff. You've got Taysom Hill, who can be a part of that conversation if he's not asked to be a part of a different conversation this offseason. Not a big fan of that idea, right? Tight end at the second round pick or the Saints top pick, whatever that is. So I went with Hendon Hooker here to just kind of keep the train going. But, there are other quarterbacks to like here. Tanner McKee is somebody that continues to climb up draft boards. He's really high on Mike Renner's list over at PFF, the draft expert. He has Tanner McKee as like his 4th ranked quarterback, who's a little bit more of a sit in the pocket and distribute passes, but he's a little bit, more like what we're used to seeing in New Orleans, as opposed to being a guy that raises his floor with his legs. But he gets the ball out quickly. He's very accurate, so on and so forth. You can kind of say the same things about Bo Nix, potentially especially with his 2022 production out of Oregon, got a lot better there, but also has a whole bunch that he can do with his legs. So I just like the idea of investing a top pick in a quarterback, whether it's on the trade market or through the draft itself. At pick 71 in the third round, I went with Tuli Tuipulotu, the the edge rusher out of USC. Dude is a bit of a wrecking ball, just really, really refined player as well. This is not one of those project picks that the Saints have had at at edge rusher over the course of the past couple of years. Tuli would come in ready to go and wouldn't have to be either. Like, that's the other thing that's really nice about it, is that he's pretty polished, but he wouldn't have to carry the weight of like a Travon Walker, who had to come in and be as NFL ready as possible because the Jacksonville Jaguars needed him to be out on the field. The Saints don't necessarily need that because of the growth and development of Carl Granderson, because of Cameron Jordan, because hopefully Payton Turner can stay healthy in 2023. He would be able to rotate in with that group and develop over time so that they're effectively set for life post Cameron Jordan, whenever that was to come. Then I went to the defensive interior. Zach Pickens out of South Carolina. Not going to get you a lot of disruption, taking on double teams like guard, center, ace blocks, things like that, lining up at the one technique, which is the more inside spot. Not going to be a nose tackle for you, but is very effective from the three technique on out, and being somebody that can be disruptive on that defensive line. Good penetrator, good pass rusher. Needs to refine a little bit in the run game, but again, if you're giving me the option of being weak against the run or weak against the pass, I'll take weak against the run every single day. At round 5, this is where I usually go quarterback. I like Tajay Spears here out of Tulane, but I went a bit of a different angle here. What if I told you that there was a back, 5'11", 215 pounds, almost kind of Mark Ingram-esque in terms of his build, but a little bit lighter, but brings you all the things that Mark Ingram brought you, as somebody that could run between the tackles, but can also be effective in the passing game and as a pass blocker. Remember, this is important. One of the reasons why Boom and Zoom worked wasn't just because of the fact that Mark Ingram was a between the tackles runner. It's because it didn't telegraph anything having Mark Ingram out on the field. Having Mark Ingram out on the field did not mean that it was going to be a run play. It could have very well been a passing play because they trusted him in pass protection and because they trusted him enough to throw the ball to him. Same thing with Latavius Murray. Think about the times that Latavius Murray, chipped a defensive end or blocked a linebacker and then just kind of dropped back into as a receiver and then ended up scoring touchdowns that way, right? That's something that you can get with this kid. And what if I told you can get that with potential 4.3 speed? Israel Abanikanda out of Pittsburgh is one of my favorite running backs in this year's class that would fall to a little bit behind some of these guys like Tajay Spears and, Roshan Johnson, these guys that will be 4th, 5th round guys. He could be, a 5th, 6th round type guy unless he continues to raise up. We know how the NFL loves its 40 time numbers. Once he runs his 40, he's probably going to be see his draft stock raise a little bit, but we can enjoy it for all the way until the end of February until he finally runs that 40. Next up in round 5, pick 167, I went with offensive lineman. I went to the interior offensive line here, Jackson Kirkland. He's got experience at right guard and at left tackle over at Washington. So if you want somebody that can kind of move around and then have, a good, talented player that does really, really good pass blocking work, as well as run blocking work as well, moves laterally very well, not super, weighed down or anything like that. I like what Jackson Kirkland could potentially bring you as a round 5 guy. Round 6, I think the Saints should double dip at edge rusher. I went with Ali Gay out of LSU. There were a couple of other guys that I could have gone with. Isaiah Land, for instance, out of Florida A&M, but he's really got to put on some weight. He's like 215 pounds sort of his playing weight at FAMU. But I think the Saints could value here from double dipping at edge rusher, double dipping at running back, or double dipping at even quarterback, as we've seen other teams do in the past. So I really like an Ali Gay coming in and being another guy that can get involved in that edge rush rotation where the Saints could have some opportunities available. Then with the final 2 picks here in round 7, I went with North Carolina linebacker Drake Thomas. That's a special teams pick. Really good downhill guy, plays with his head on fire, all that. And then AJ Finley, the safety out of Mississippi, plays a little bit more of a deep safety role, has pretty good range, especially for his size, 6'2", 6'3", 205 pounds, makes really nice plays from coming downhill from the deep safety spot as well. Just needs to improve as a tackler. Keith Sanchez over at TDN did a really great scouting breakdown of him over at TDN. And AJ Finley is just one of those guys that is kind of appealing in that way, but would be a later round safety. You don't want to thrust him into being a starter there. He's just a good depth piece, and the Saints need depth pieces at that position, with Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu being the only safeties under contract going into 2023. I could see JT Gray back. I could see Daniel Sorensen back. So you get a guy like AJ Finley who can help you with depth, who can also go out there and make some plays in special teams. And then you add Smoke Monday on top of that, hopefully, as well, and then let these guys kind of battle it out so the Saints can pick 4 or 5 going into 2023. That's what you're basically looking at doing in the 7th round anyway. All right, coming up next, Sean Payton certainly seems to be expecting a second interview with the Denver Broncos, according to reports. What does that mean for the New Orleans Saints? And could another team still jump in and add their name to the sweepstakes? We're going to break all of that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Daily fantasy made easy and honestly the way that it should be. It's you versus the house, you using your knowledge of your favorite players, favorite team, favorite leagues, all of those things, as opposed to going up against somebody's like quick makeshift lineup or going up against a million lineups that are all mysteries to you trying to win a cut of some pot of money. No, none of that. It's you versus the house. You pick the players 2 to 5. Simply choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projections. You get those right, you can win up to 10 times your entry. And if you're a first-time user, you can also get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by using the promo code Locked On. Once again, that's promo code Locked On for that 100% instant deposit match if you're a new user over at prizepicks.com or in the Prize Picks app today. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Looks like Sean Payton is expecting a second interview with the Denver Broncos, though nothing official yet. This is a big step if you're a Saints fan hoping that Sean Payton gets traded, which you should all be, right? And, of course, getting the Saints some draft capital back. Thank you so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. So on Monday morning, a report came from Jeff Duncan over at NOLA.com that Sean Payton would be headed back to Denver in anticipation of a second interview with the Denver Broncos. So he also came back and clarified a little bit that there's nothing official here on the Sean Payton Denver Broncos second interview. They haven't finalized a second meeting, but he does plan to, Sean Payton, fly to Denver on Wednesday night in anticipation that he will have a meeting with team officials there, presumably that night or Thursday, according to Jeff Duncan. So this is good news, because if Sean Payton is going to Denver with the expectation that there will be a second interview, then very likely it seems that there would be a second interview around like the 25th or 26th next week. So when it comes down to, or this week, so the thing that you're watching here over the course of the next few days is when you get to that second interview, and could Sean Payton kind of quickly accelerate as the favorite, or the Denver Broncos quickly accelerate as the favorite when it comes to Sean Payton? And honestly, like, they've kind of been the favorite though, haven't they? They've got Russell Wilson. He's openly laid out a plan around, you know, how to coach him up and how to get things fixed there. There's a couple of different pieces that you can look at as well in terms of, you know, his relationship with that organization. The one tricky thing, or the time that he's taken to interview with that organization already, they were the first ones to bring him out and meet him in person. Payton had an in-person interview with the Carolina Panthers that got rescheduled, so that might be happening early this week. The Houston Texans brought him in on Zoom, and they decided that process was done, so it doesn't seem that the Houston Texans are interested, or that he's interested in the Houston Texans. So that kind of leaves Denver and Carolina there, because Arizona, as we highlighted a while back now, had just dropped off the face of the earth when it came to these conversations. So Denver's kind of the front runner here because he hasn't met with Carolina yet, right? So a second interview goes a long way of indicating, and again, nothing official yet, but if that second interview does happen, indicates big time that Sean Payton to Denver could very well be on the way. And that's good news for the New Orleans Saints, good news for New Orleans Saints fans, because everyone is on the same page in terms of what it is that the New Orleans Saints want: a first-round pick and more. They have a first-round pick. People forget that because they traded for Russell Wilson, but they still have a first-round pick that they got back from Miami when they traded Bradley Chubb to Miami, and the Miami Dolphins had that originally from the San Francisco 49ers, which is a part of the whole Trey Lance move and all that. So the Broncos have the San Francisco 49ers first-round pick. Now, the San Francisco 49ers are one of the final 4 teams in the NFL. So at best, you're looking at like 31, 30, 29, or 28 in terms of what you're getting from them. But hey, it's better than 40 being your top selection, right? Plus, of course, that's the cornerstone of the trade. And then more draft compensation in day 2, maybe some stuff in 2024 could potentially be on the way as well. Now, there is something else to consider here. Could there be another team that enters this conversation? The Dallas Cowboys lost in the divisional round, not the wild card round. I was a little bit more certain of the idea of Jerry Jones moving on from Mike McCarthy if the Cowboys lost in the first round, in the wild card round. In the division round, I'm not so sure. But that is now 12 straight appearances, or not 12 straight appearances, but 12 times, 12 postseason appearances in which the team hasn't really been able to advance. And so this could be a little bit of an issue for the Dallas Cowboys, who might look at Mike McCarthy and say, okay, you've had a couple of shots in the playoffs now. You haven't been able to get anywhere. We're done. We're finished. And so that could be the case, especially with that weird play call at the end of the game, some bad clock management toward the end of the game as well, that this could still happen to where Dallas could say, you know what, there's a guy out there that we love on the market, ready to be with a new team. This isn't working out with Mike McCarthy. But I could see why Jerry Jones would be a little bit more kind of like, maybe let's not rush to this, right? They still made it to the division round in the playoffs. They stuck with Jason Garrett for years and years and years and years, as Peter Bukowski over at Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Packers will tell you. So there is a chance there that, and also, let's say they move on from Mike McCarthy, but Payton really, really likes his opportunity in Denver, then where are the Dallas Cowboys left after that, right? So I think that makes it a little bit more challenging, the idea of Dallas still entering the chat here. But hey, like I've mentioned before, we never say never when it comes to the NFL. But the big thing that we're going to be watching here over the next couple of days, the interview between Sean Payton and the Carolina Panthers, David Tepper, that's set to be rescheduled to, I believe it's today or at least early this week. And then, of course, that piece of travel that awaits for him to potentially head over to the Denver Broncos and then go into what would be a second interview with the Denver Broncos, which would be a massive step forward in the Sean Payton conversation. And again, good news for the New Orleans Saints. All right, so coming up next, I've got a crazy idea about how the New Orleans Saints could potentially manage their offensive coordinator spot in 2023. It might be too crazy, but I'm going to let you tell me. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our new friends over at FanDuel. Yep, it's that time. The playoffs are here, and we're really, really excited about this new partnership that we have in bringing in our sports betting partner over here at Locked On, because they're the number one sports book in America, and it is FanDuel. And so if you are new to FanDuel, even better for you, because there are so many great things, great features that make it so much easier to get involved on sports betting when it comes to FanDuel. And now, new customers are going to be able to join today and get a free $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first bet of $5 or more, your first $5 bet. So keep in mind, you got to place the $5 bet to get the $150, but it's there. All you have to do is sign up today at FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel has all of your favorite bets from money lines to point spreads to player props. Plus, you could even combine all of those bets and get a bigger payout on a same game parlay. I love those. Those are always a lot of fun. Right now, you can see different things. I just placed my bet on the Cincinnati Bengals to beat or at least cover the 1.5 point spread against the Kansas City Chiefs. I believes in Burrow. I'm ready for it. You want to get in on that or anything else around the world of sports, make sure you're going to check out FanDuel today. It's all on the app. It's super safe, secure, and it's super easy to use as well. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first bet of $5 and you're going to get a $150 credit in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment worth more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with my Galaxy Brain Theory. I woke up on Monday morning and I said, oh my goodness, what if the New Orleans Saints enjoyed co-defensive coordinators so much that they would be willing to entertain the idea of co-offensive coordinators in 2023? I'm going to let it sink in. take a sip of my coffee, let it sink in just how absolutely crazy I am. But really think about it, right? Because there is something to be at least entertained, maybe not necessarily in the co-offensive coordinator idea, but it's the most fair way that I think I can make this work. Being offensive coordinator doesn't mean that you're offensive play caller. The Saints have said that they don't plan to make any further changes to their personnel when it comes to the coaching staff, with the exception, of course, of filling the hole that is now there from moving on from Dan Rojar, who was their tight end coach and run game coordinator. So Declan Doyle, offensive assistant, has been my pick to elevate to the tight ends coach role. He's now the tight end coach with the Senior Bowl. Okay, the dots are connecting, right? So I would expect Declan Doyle to be in the running for the Saints tight end coach. Now they have to figure out run game coordinator. Maybe you go to Joel Thomas there. Joel Thomas, the Saints running back coach, has gotten some interests from the collegiate world and stuff like that over the course of the past couple of years. So maybe that's a way to keep him, maybe give him a little bit of a raise. They did that with Ronald Curry, gave him that pass game coordinator title in 2022. They could do the same thing with Joel Thomas and the run game coordinator in 2023. So Ross, where does it all come in? So the reason why I think about this is that I think about what is Ronald Curry doing with the Senior Bowl? Well, he's the offensive coordinator. Now, we have to be careful here, right? Offensive coordinator for a week's worth of football, 3 practices and a game, right? That's really what you're the offensive coordinator of when you go and be the offensive coordinator at the Senior Bowl. It has massive impact for the Saints' ability to scout and have an understanding of their Senior Bowl prospects, of which they've drafted, I think it's like 15 or 16 since 2015, right? Like they love their Senior Bowl prospects. And they've signed even more in undrafted free agency and all that. They've gotten at least 2 new players each year, 2 rookie players on their roster each year since 2015 coming out of the Senior Bowl. Like they love their Senior Bowl guys. So yeah, there's that part of it. But what about the personal development of Ronald Curry? So when I think about that and I think about, okay, well, the Saints were willing to kind of do something that doesn't get done a lot in the NFL. We've seen the Minnesota Vikings do it. We saw the New England Patriots kind of go co-offensive coordinator this year. The issue is that they had defensive coordinators doing that, which was weird. Matt Patricia, all that. So could the Saints look at, and I spoke about this with Eric Asher on radio not too long ago, keeping Pete Carmichael as offensive coordinator, but letting Ronald Curry call the plays, or going somewhere else as a play caller, right? Like letting somebody else call the plays on offense. It could be an option. I think if you're the person that is asked to call plays when you're not the offensive coordinator, you kind of get the short end of the stick, right? Like you're doing the offensive coordinator's job or a big part of an offensive coordinator or head coach's job, but you don't carry the role of offensive coordinator. So how do you address that? Well, you elevate somebody to co-offensive coordinator. And you give Pete Carmichael the ability to design plays, to install systems, to do all the things that has made him excellent and the longest active tenured offensive coordinator in the NFL. But you get play calling opportunities somewhere else where maybe things can get a little bit more creative. You can get a fresh perspective by getting a new play caller involved. Now it's still in-house, but you're not going outside the house anyway. You're not going for an external hire one way or another, right? You're not getting that from the Saints in 2023. So we've seen Ronald Curry go from working with wide receivers to quarterback coach within a year. We watched him go from quarterback coach to quarterback coach / pass game coordinator within a year. Now do we see him go from quarterback coach to co-offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, just like we've seen with Ryan Nielsen and Kris Rashid, who became co-defensive coordinators. But Kris Rashid maintained his role as a secondary coach, and Ryan Nielsen maintained his role as defensive line coach. The Saints would do something that no NFL team is doing right now. Co-defensive coordinators, assuming that Kris Rashid and or Ryan Nielsen don't get hired away. Ryan Nielsen up for the Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator job, as well as the Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator job. Kris Rashid up for the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator job, or at least those requests have been made. So if neither one of those guys gets hired away, they come back as co-defensive coordinators. The Saints were very happy with that structure. But do they like it enough to roll the dice and say, but wait, there's more? And then elevate Ronald Curry to co-offensive coordinator. I'm using Ronald Curry as the example because I think he's made for that idea, right? Like if they are going to go through with something like this, if this was the way that they went, and it's not just me like galaxy braining out in the morning, then there is he's the guy, right? Like if they were going to do that, like Ronald Curry's clearly the guy. And so could he and Pete Carmichael then be co-offensive coordinators while the Saints also have co-defensive coordinators? I don't know. Seems a little weird. I'm not going to lie. Like I know it's weird, but every now and then I get to just think up an idea and say, hey, what do you think? What do you think? So let me know what you think. Might be too crazy. But I'm just trying to think about like, how did the Saints get a fresh perspective going into 2023 when they looked at 2022 and said, yeah, that'll work. Like, that can't be the case. You got to get something else going there. So could that be the way that the Saints go about it, to where they don't make any changes on the coaching staff, but they do adjust roles and responsibilities a teeny tiny bit, and they get that play calling off of Pete Carmichael, let Pete Carmichael do what makes him great, right? What has made him great in the past, and then get a fresh perspective in there and play calling. I'd do it. But, look, there's a reason why I'm not the general manager, right? Because I'm an idiot. So we'll see how it goes. All right, y'all. I appreciate you so much for joining me for another episode of Locked On Saints. Special thanks again to our new partners over at FanDuel. Make sure you're going to check them out, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Coming up tomorrow in our Tuesday episode, we'll continue to track what's going on with Sean Payton, of course. But we're also going to take a look with our Tuesday episodes. We're going to start kind of putting our focus on like the moves the Saints need to make over the course of the offseason. So we'll have a few more of what moves that the Saints need to make in order to get back to the playoffs in 2023. We'll break that down and also answer the question, what's the goal for the New Orleans Saints this year? Like, what's the bar? What do they have to do in order to make you feel better as a Saints fan from their 2022 disappointing season? So we'll continue to break all of that down and much more here on the Locked On Saints podcast. Appreciate you so much, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well. Thank you so much, as always, y'all, for making me a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, say hi. Big shout out to Sam. Good to see you yesterday as I was getting lunch and all that other stuff. Came up, said hi, chopped it up a little bit about what the Saints need to do in 2023. Super dope. Appreciate you saying hi. Look forward to anybody else that's willing to come up and say hello. Doesn't matter who I'm with, what I'm doing. Doesn't matter. Say hi. I appreciate you. And as always, if you need anything else in between these episodes on your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.